here today. And I do not believe we have an in-camera report tonight. So if we could proceed then, the first item of business is the school reopening plans progress report from the director. So Director Roberto, if you'd like to start, please.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. My name is Joanna Roberto, and I'm the Director of Education for Grand Area District School Board. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. This evening, we will be sharing our current reopening plans that continue to be flexible, fluid, and responsive as we support our students and our staff with the focus on safety and a welcoming reopening. We recognize that these are very challenging times for all of us and that there is lots of information to be shared. At this time, I would ask that our PowerPoint is up and if we can confirm that that's available. Thank you.
Thank you. The PowerPoint is up.
I can assure you that our staff continues to refine our plans according to current evidence-based information as we work with the Ministry of Education and the guidance of our local public health officials throughout this process. As we receive new information, we will ensure it reflects the needs of our communities in Grand Area District School Board. Through our shared leadership, I'd also like to acknowledge all of our stakeholders as important partners. Your input and questions matter in this process. As we work together, we will continue to keep you informed. I'd like to take this opportunity this evening to thank our parents and guardians and community, our teaching staff and support staff, our central staff and departments, our principals and vice principals, our union federations and associations, and the ongoing work of our senior team. I would also like to thank our Board of Trustees for their support throughout this process to address the needs of our students and our valued staff. Should direction change, we will always communicate these updates with you as soon as possible. We will also provide our families and staff with a startup guide later this week, and we would encourage you to continue to review our frequently asked questions as they will be updated regularly on our website. I want to ensure you that we are doing the best that we can for a safe startup, and we will get through this together. I want to thank you for your continued support and cooperation. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to senior team, who will be providing an overview of our elementary and secondary plans, our health and safety protocols that continue to include enhanced cleaning and masks, our special education updates, and mental health and well-being resources. If we can ask the trustees to provide us with questions at the end, we will then pause and we will go through questions at that time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Roberto. Good evening, trustees. As you are all aware, we are returning to school in an in-person conventional model or a remote learning model for families. Currently, parents have been invited in our system to declare their intent for their students by survey. The data will then inform the number of students we will have learning in person and the number of students we will have learning online. In slide 1 before you is the overview for what a full day return will look like in a conventional model for our kindergarten to grade 8 students. As you can see, students are returning 5 days a week to 300 minutes a day of learning. Within that learning model, teachers will be providing blended learning time, synchronous and asynchronous learning, just in case the model should shift over the course of the year. New to conventional learning, however, this year is cohorting, which applies to our students. And as a result, staff will be entering the classrooms for certain subjects like French, core French, and there will be no rotary in schools where this may currently exist. Could we go to the next slide, please? Parents can opt out of a full day return and have their children learn at home. Similar, though, to the full day return, it is a 5-day model. However, students will be clustered by grade with a virtual teacher in a virtual school. The next slide, please. Aligned with the conventional model, students in remote or online learning will have 300 minutes of learning in a balanced day timetable. A sample has been provided here. As outlined in the newly released PPM 164, there are now specific guidelines about remote learning and the minimum requirements for synchronous learning. But those synchronous learning requirements may be divided into shorter periods. For example, if you're in kindergarten during the first block, you may spend the first 10 minutes with your teacher. She may be singing your name and you may be clapping along at home. And then there may be a breakout where you do something different in small groups throughout the day, and then you come back together. So there will be a blend of small and whole group throughout the day, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that time is the entire time in front of a computer. Slide 4, please. Sorry, there we go. Parents, as you can see, can transition in and out of remote to full day return. The dates before you were selected because they are natural breaks. So just after Thanksgiving, just after Christmas, and just after March break. At this time, it is a guide. We will continue to be fluid. We will revisit these dates as we move forward. As well, we will be encouraging parents to approach principals with individual cases as they arise. Beyond the slides, I would just like to share a few key messages this evening. We know that in elementary, we're going to have many new students, first-time junior kindergarten, students who are moving schools, or students who are newly entering our board. Again, we will ensure our principals are in touch with these families prior to school startup. For many parents, they are curious and anxious about what does return to school look like. We know communication will continue to be key. We know providing parents with school messenger scripts, emails, and most importantly, visuals of what our classrooms and schools will look like, including our self-contained classrooms. We are also cognizant that all communication needs to be in other languages. Lastly, I just want to say a huge thank you to an elementary working group, the voices of 3 elementary principals, union presidents, the program teams, and my colleagues have been invaluable as we've looked at the results of student and parent surveys and various documents to create this plan, which will no doubt continue to evolve as we all learn more, reflect, and continue to meet and collaborate. Thank you. I will now turn it over to Superintendent Martins.
Good evening, trustees and visitors with us on our board meeting this evening. As Superintendent DeVos has discussed, Grand Erie will be in the secondary program, also in the conventional learning model. And that is different than many boards around us for reasons selected by the ministry. In front of you is option 1, which is our full return to school model. And this quadmester model is based upon some of the same factors elementary was based upon. 5 full days of instruction a week, 300 minutes of instruction for students daily. In secondary, however, the maximum number of students who can be together is 100. So as a result of that, we've had to change our delivery model from a semestered model where a student would typically have 4 courses per semester to having 2 classes per semester for double the time. So what you see before you here is a sample schedule of what that would look like for our students and for our teachers. These are samples that we have provided, and as Superintendent DeVos has indicated, we have worked collaboratively with our union team and Ontario Principal Council reps of principals and vice principals in secondary to try and continue to work through a timetable that works and that is agreeable for us to deliver in the best interest of our students. So you will see that in the morning, students would have one course. That's what we're calling period 1A and 1B. And then they'd have lunch. And in the afternoon, they would be having their second course, period 2A and 2B. Next slide, please. In this quadmester model, we are very regimented by the number of hours of instruction that are required in a secondary school to grant credit. That's 110 hours. In order for us to meet those requirements based upon the ministry recommendations, we have had to go to the quad model, as you can see there. So the dates for those quads are included, start dates, even though some of those include PA days and examination days, just for your information. And we have had to amend the report card timelines and the mid quadmester and final quadmester reporting and our calendar within our student information system to address that. Next slide, please. For the online learning model, similar and same messaging as Superintendent DeVos talked about, principal or parents and guardians and students, and we really hope that parents in the secondary level are including the student voice about their decision and their comfort about returning to school or doing online learning. This is our second option. Again, as Superintendent DeVos has said, it's for 5 days a week and will involve synchronous and asynchronous learning. Seeing that the memo just came out on Thursday with respect to online learning, at this point we're looking at 110 of 150 minutes of instruction per course in the quad model being by the synchronous delivery, and we would be supporting students in samples, but secondary ones, similar to what Superintendent DeVos talked about. Attendance for our students in both face-to-face and online learning will be around contacts and engagement. So if you're physically there in class, you're marked present for those courses. If you are attending your synchronous session with your online learning teacher, you will be marked present. And I can't see the bottom of the slide, Superintendent Monroe. Do you mind moving it up? I don't have it. Thank you very much, Superintendent Monroe. The students obviously would require devices and internet to do online learning in both elementary and secondary, and Superintendent Monroe is going to talk a bit more about that later on. What you need to know, though, like the elementary model, is that if students and parents opt for the online learning model, they will be in courses with students across the board who have chosen online learning, depending upon the courses and the selections they have made with their home school. So it will be a difference that it won't be your homeschool teacher or your teacher of instruction that was on your sample timetable or your draft timetable you received. It would be a different online teacher delivering the content through the online learning model and the synchronous and asynchronous delivery of that model. So just wanted everyone to be aware of that in your decision making, but the schedule and the format, similar to what I just showed you in the full day model, would be in existence. A 9 to 3 expectation with the synchronous expectations from the ministry. Next slide, please. So secondary registration process. So as you know, we have asked any students who are new to Grand Area to pre-register with us up until August 13th to ensure that you had a September 8th start with us. And for those who didn't have that opportunity and wish to do so, there is information. I believe, again, Superintendent Monroe will share this, but after August 27th, you can contact the School of Record by address to set up an appointment to register. Just given everything that is happening with us, we will do our best efforts to get you to start school as soon as possible, but we cannot guarantee at this point a September 8th start for you in secondary schools. Parents completing the surveys with respect to their intention is critical for us to determine the delivery of model both in person and online, because it's a big piece of a puzzle we have to put together for you in secondary to deliver different courses in different areas with different teacher qualifications. So if you have not had that opportunity to complete the online survey, we are encouraging trustees and parents and guardians who are watching to complete that by the August 23rd deadline so that we know your intent. But also, if for some reason you're unable to do that and internet and access is an issue, you need to know that once August 27th comes, we will be following up with parents and families who haven't responded to find out what's happening with them so that we can be as prepared as possible for their students' return. Next slide, please. So I think I've talked a little bit about this. I'm looking at it. Yes, I have. So if you're not in the same school, the deadline, parents must inform the board 2 weeks. So here's a critical part that I talked about that aligns with the quadmesters that are new for us in Grand Erie. Should your student be considering switching delivery models from the online model to the in-person model or vice versa, we need you to notify your school principal, and at this point by August 23rd, it's through the online survey by that deadline for a September 1st or for you a September 8th class start. Moving through the quadmesters, you will see what those notification to switch delivery mode dates are. They are definitely aligned with 2 weeks prior to the start of the next quadmester so that we can plan accordingly again for the online and in delivery sections of the program. Next slide, please. Before I turn it over to my colleague, we know that there is lots of questions with respect to our partners, our Indigenous education partners and Six Nations, but also our Mississaugas of the Credit partners who have made some different decisions with respect to their elementary programming. We want you to know that we are open and responsive and we are working with you and with Six Nations Mental Health around how we can support and continue to work with having students come to school in class or in person, but also online if that is the student and parent choice. There are lots of other questions that are specific to secondary that we will be providing answers for to principals, but also later on in our FAQs, and some of those are already covered. So hopefully in terms of programming, you know that we are going to try and run the best possible program we can for you in secondary, given the many restrictions we have. And we know there are concerns around co-op, around technological studies courses, around physical education, and the use of devices. We are working on all of that to ensure that we can continue to deliver the overall expectations of the curriculum for which your child or a student is taking. So thank you for your time, and I now turn it over to my superintendent colleague, Thompson.
Thank you, Superintendent Martins. Good evening, trustees and Grand Erie community guests. From the special education standpoint, you can see we will continue to provide the supports and services that are required based on a student's IPRC, and these programs will continue to be included in individual education plans. The most appropriate learning expectation for each child's individual program will be considered based on the learning environment in which they are engaged. So students will receive programming from their classroom teachers, whether they are in regular class or in a self-contained classroom, in both face-to-face and online learning environments. Learning resource teachers will continue to provide supports and collaborate with classroom teachers to ensure the programs meet student learning requirements. Students that have had supports from educational assistants will continue to receive these supports if they are required, whether they are engaged in face-to-face or online learning. We continue to consult regularly with our union and federation partners to ensure that we are consistently considering the health and safety of our most vulnerable students, as well as the staff members that work with our students in all our reentry decision plans. Procedures for the use of personal protective equipment, the use of break spaces, and specific cleaning protocols for specialized student equipment are being created. Input on these procedures is being sought through school and system-based staff, as well as Grand Erie Special Education Advisory Committee. We are fortunate to be running the summer school transition program this year in 15 of our Grand Erie schools, occurring this week and next week. And because of this, we are able to see face-to-face special education programming in action in our schools in this new reality. This will also inform our future decisions and plans. We are also working on specific reentry guidelines for our special education central staff. We continue to align our support staff with clusters of schools and are ensuring that these staff have the appropriate PPE to be able to work directly with students where required and with staff members. We are also encouraging these staff members to engage in virtual meetings with students and staff and families wherever appropriate. Next slide, please. When we're considering the mental health and well-being of our students and staff, ensuring a physically and psychologically safe, positive, and welcoming return to school, whether it be face-to-face or virtual, is a priority consideration this school year. As you can see from this slide, supports for all students and their families and staff will be provided through a tiered support approach. We will ensure that universal strategies and supports that are good for all members of the school community will be in place to start the school year. We know that for some in our school communities, additional supports may be required to support their sense of safety and belonging. And for others, a few, we recognize very specialized and intensive mental health supports will be necessary. These necessary supports for some and few will be provided via our social workers, our child and youth workers, consultations with our human resources department, direction for staff members to our employee assistant providers, and via our community partners. The key priority goals in Grand Erie in the area of mental health and well-being will be to provide supports and services to students and staff with the goal of building school and work environments that are safe, that foster a sense of belonging and optimism so that learning can take place. I will now turn it over to Superintendent Monroe.
Thank you. Sorry, I just had to switch my slide over. Thank you. With respect to technology, as has been mentioned by Superintendent Martins and Superintendent DeVos, students will require devices and/or internet to participate in online learning. We also recognize that as students return to the classroom, students will be permitted to bring their own device. In the same way that students will maintain their own belongings, this will be true for them bringing their own device to school if they so wish. As has been mentioned earlier on in today's presentation, an online application has been used to efficiently survey families and provide data so that we can understand the needs of our families. This survey is available from August the 13th until the 23rd. August 23rd was chosen as the end date for the survey in order to meet our timelines for receiving feedback and planning forward as the information contained in the survey supports system and school next steps, including timetabling, staffing for the virtual learning environment, transportation, and planning forward. It's recognized that as families are receiving additional information, plans may change. As such, we will monitor and reevaluate the survey timelines in the coming days. The survey that is going out to families is brief. Families are asked if they intend for their child or children to return to face-to-face learning or online. If the family chooses the face-to-face option, they're asked about their eligibility for transportation and their intention as to whether or not they will take transportation, as well as their intentions around before and after school programming. If the family selects online, they are asked about technological needs and connectivity needs related to Wi-Fi. To date, we have received 5,715 recorded responses. Of those responses, 4,787 have indicated a full return to school, and 928, or 6%, have indicated that their child will be participating online. As we continue to support online learning, we'll be working with digital tools that will enhance synchronous learning, and of course, training will continue to support staff and student learning. For online learning, program content will be delivered through Brightspace, with the synchronous learning facilitated with Brightspace and Teams. Further to the elementary and secondary comments on synchronous learning, it's important to know that blended learning will be used in the classroom model as well, so that students will have experienced learning synchronously in a virtual space to support a smooth transition in the event that schools must transition back to remote learning. As well, we will be using lots of intervention and enhancement software to ensure that online programming is engaging. And finally, currently Grand Erie students who received laptops in the spring have maintained these devices. Any students new to Grand Erie who require technology or connectivity for online learning will receive what they need. As you may recall, devices were borrowed from elementary classrooms throughout our board in order to ensure that the 1,850 students who requested devices received them. Devices next up for the 2020-21 refresh schedule were identified and removed from the elementary classrooms to meet this need. We are currently working with Compugen to accelerate the schedule to replenish classroom devices so that each elementary classroom has 5 devices and each secondary classroom has 8 devices, as outlined in the learning plan leveraging digital. And I will now turn it over to my colleague, Superintendent Wazinski.
Thank you, Superintendent Monroe. Good evening, trustees, colleagues, and guests. Today I want to review the transportation and how we plan to address the return to school from a home to school transportation. So what we're looking at is operating at a conventional model with respect to ridership. However, health and safety and enhanced preventative cleaning and disinfecting will continue to be our focus. Daily self-screening will be required for all bus drivers, monitors, riders' aides before work. As well, we are going to be asking that all students perform a self-assessment daily before entering the school bus. We will be including PPE for school bus drivers and monitors that is consistent with school staff who are working
is now exiting.
Proximity to students with unique needs. While students are boarding, deboarding the bus, or when having to assist students on the bus mid-route, the school bus driver must further protect themselves by wearing a face shield, and students will wait at their designated stop with adherence to physical distancing. We will require students in grades 4 to 12 to wear a face covering while on the bus and when transferring between vehicles. Masks for JK to grade 3 are not required, but strongly encouraged. In addition, to promote air circulation within the compartment of the bus, and where temperature and weather permits, windows will be opened during the commute. We will also have hand sanitizer in place to assist with clean hand hygiene practices. This will be made available for use on each school bus. In addition, we will have enhanced disinfecting processes in place daily Drivers will be required to disinfect high-touch areas of the bus at least twice per day with a product that is effective against COVID-19. Areas deemed to be high-touch will include handrails, seat top and sides, as well as lower window panes, frames of windows, and other high-touch points. One of the key components of making sure that we have a good, solid plan is ensuring that we have seating plans in place to assist with contact tracing by public health. Students will be assigned a specific seat on the bus, and these lists will be used as a tool by public health officials in the event that contact tracing of an illness is required. In the event that a student becomes ill with COVID-like symptoms on the bus, the student will be isolated as space allows, and if the student is not wearing a mask, one will be provided, and one will be required to be worn until the student can be exited off the bus. In the event that student or driver has a confirmed case of COVID-19 and was riding a school bus, that vehicle will be taken out of service and a deep cleaning performed. We will also be in touch with public health to understand their guidance as we move forward on what that will look like. The deep clean will see the entire bus disinfected before it is brought back into service with students. In addition, illness kits will be present on each school bus. The kits will contain additional supplies to protect both the driver and other students on the bus. As a reminder, students can opt out of transportation services at any time. There will be communication sent home outlining these daily protocols and perhaps checklists to help parents prepare their children for their first bus ride under these new safety procedures. I will now pass it over to Superintendent DeVos for a brief update on childcare.
Thank you, Superintendent Wazinski. Over the summer, the board worked with our childcare providers to open several of our childcare centers in our school. Collaboration continues with our consolidated municipal service managers and our childcare operators and our authorized recreation providers and our coterminous board so that we will be able to provide before and after school programming for your children where there is a sufficient demand and or viability. Last week, late, the ministry released updated changes to their before and after school kindergarten to grade 6 policies and their early on guide. As more information becomes available to us, we will be sharing with our school community or our board community. Thank you. And I'll turn it back to Superintendent Wazinski.
Thanks again, Superintendent DeVos. I will now focus on the health and safety protocols for a full day return for granted. So one of the big concepts for us with returning to school is going to be focused on the public health 6 pillars, which is really screening, isolation, physical distancing, enhanced cleaning, cohorting, and face covering. So for health and safety, again, similar to the school bus, JK to grade 3, masks will not be required, but are going to be strongly encouraged, where students in grade 4 to 12 will be required to wear non-medical or cloth masks indoors, including hallways and classrooms. Students will be permitted to use their own medical masks, but non-medical masks will be made available to all students. There will be time spent in the school reviewing the proper use of masks, hand hygiene, and respiratory etiquette. Outdoor times will be opportunities to provide student breaks from wearing masks within their cohorts in designated play areas. In addition, masks may be removed during break periods, provided physical distancing is maintained. The Ministry of Education has allowed for exceptions for students who have health conditions that preclude them from wearing masks. Requests for exemption can be completed through the school principal, and documentation will be required. Next slide, please. With respect to some elementary pieces, the use of common spaces will be restricted as much as possible, such as the library and gymnasium. Physical education will be held outdoors as often as possible, and student personal belongings will be minimized, such as backpacks, clothing, etc. And if brought, will be asked that belongings be labeled and kept in the child's designated area. Classroom sizes will vary across the district, and schools will remove unnecessary furniture and will be setting up desks with as much distancing as possible and to allow teachers with as much teaching as possible. Next slide, please. For the secondary panel, bell times will include regular scheduled times. Lunch will be provided at alternative times or other locations within the school. No sharing of food or beverages will be permitted. For bathroom access, passes will be required and logged. The library cafeteria during instructional time may be used for students with spares. And again, the use of common spaces will be restricted as much as possible, with directional arrow markings providing the physical distancing component mentioned earlier. And lastly, lockers will not be used. Next slide, please. Other precautions that we are taking in terms of health and safety are that all staff will be required to wear masks and eye protection where required. These will be provided at the board to all staff. Enhanced personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, for classroom teachers and educational assistants will be made available. As of September 1st, and until further notice, visitor access to Grand Erie sites will be restricted. Visitors should have an appointment prior to visiting a Grand Erie site. However, visitor access will be at the discretion of a principal. All visitor access will be logged and documented. Finally, hand sanitizers will be made available in all classrooms and designated areas of the school, including entrances of the building. Next slide, please. In terms of enhanced cleaning, all board buildings will be cleaned daily, following the regular custodial cleaning schedules. During the school day, the number of high touch points listed on your screen will be disinfected twice daily. In addition, investments are being made to increase the number of custodians in our schools. This means extra cleaning and extra disinfecting for our staff and students. Next slide, please. There's a number of personal protective equipment and cleaning supplies that will be made available to staff, students, and our custodial. Schools will be provided initially with a month supply of a number of PPE. Schools are going to be regularly monitoring their PPE supplies. An inventory of these supplies will be stocked centrally, and we will be requiring schools to monitor their own inventory on a regular basis so we can provide additional top-ups of inventory throughout the school year. PPE will be kept in a secured locked space in schools. Next slide, please. Another pillar of ensuring a successful return to school is physical adaptations. Upon the return to school, you will see signage reminding people what COVID-19 is and how it is spread, what physical distancing is, hand hygiene, symptom awareness, mask requirements, and so on, and the self-assessment. There will be layouts in classrooms that will maximize physical distancing and spread desks out as much as possible. Each school will have an entry and exit protocol in place where students will be asked to enter different entrances throughout the school. Students and staff will also see demarcation internally and externally as required for pickup and drop-off. There will be closure of drinking fountains. As well, signage will be posted for traffic flow and reminders on physical distancing. We will also see the removal of unnecessary furniture, tables, rugs from classrooms to free up space. Also, items that cannot be cleaned or disinfected regularly and will also be removed, including area rugs, upholstered furniture, and soft toys. And where hallways and stairwells are not wide enough to accommodate two-way traffic, one-way signs will be posted. Plexiglass and barriers will be installed and movable plexiglass shields provided to support schools and teams as they facilitate the delivery of education. Our HVAC systems will be adjusted to increase the amount of fresh air, and windows will be opened where possible to increase natural ventilation. Now, in collaboration with public health, a review is underway in our open concept classrooms to determine their capacity and operationalization under current public health protocols. Next slide, please. With respect to COVID-19, staff and students, as mentioned earlier during the transportation portion, will be required to do a self-assessment prior to leaving home. Daily screening for students and staff is extremely important, and parents and guardians and staff will be required to assess their children daily, and it is an expectation that parents, guardians, and staff are expected to keep children at home if they do not pass the assessment. Parents, guardians will be provided a checklist of items pertaining to daily screening, which will mirror the self-assessment tool currently available on public health websites. We are also working towards protocols with a presumptive COVID case or a suspected COVID case at one of our sites. Each work location will identify a designated sick room that will be used solely for the purpose of isolating individuals who may become ill or demonstrate symptoms throughout the school day. A kit shall also be present and used when a student, staff member, or visitor displays any symptoms or signs of COVID-19. This kit will be stored in the school's designated room. If a staff member begins to experience symptoms while at the school. They will report this immediately to the supervisor, and the protocol, which we are working on with public health, will be triggered to ensure that that staff member is properly taken care of. If a student begins to experience symptoms of COVID-19 while attending school, they will be situated in the designated room, such that ill students will always be directly supervised by a staff member. PPE will be worn by the supervising staff member, and parent guardians or emergency contacts for the child will be required to immediately pick up the child. So that's it for the health and safety portion. And I'll pass it back to Director Roberto for a summary.
Thank you. This evening, I would like to recognize the efforts of our senior team and their ongoing work. And as I stated earlier, these are very challenging times for all of us. As we move forward together, we will continue to keep you informed with new information, and we will ensure that it reflects our community in Grand Erie. Trustees, if you have any questions at this time, we'll direct them to the superintendents.
Greg, you are muted.
Right now. Okay. First of all, before I ask Trustee Sloat to ask your question, I wanted to thank all the amount of time that's been put in by senior administration. That was a very thorough report, very lengthy, but I think it has a lot of information, and I know there's a lot of concern in the community about what precautions we're taking, and that certainly addressed a large number of them. Okay, we do have questions from trustees. First, Trustee Sloat, then Trustee Gibson. No? No question.
No, it's Trustee Van Every-Albert. Sorry, I'm not on the list yet. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Let's do Trustee Gibson, then Trustee Van Every-Albert, please.
And you have Trustee Spears and Trustee Worden.
Okay.
Student Trustee Zachary.
All right. Well, let's just start with Trustee Gibson.
Okay, thank you. I actually have two questions. One's more for the elementary area. I'm getting a lot of questions from parents for classrooms that have 30 children in them, and there's concerns about, even with removing furniture, that there will be difficulties making enough distance. And my other question is, if there are children who are needing to self-isolate and need to go home but are feeling well enough to do school, will they be able to participate virtually along with their classroom? Thank you.
I'm not sure which of the superintendents wishes to answer that. Perhaps we could ask the director to be sort of the gatekeeper here.
Thank you. I believe Superintendent DeVos, you're going to answer that for us in terms of our classroom setup, and then we'll look at the health and safety piece following that.
So, Trustee Gibson, as much as possible, like you said, we will be removing as much furniture as we can. We would also be taking a look at square footage, and if we felt we couldn't have enough distancing there, then we would need to look at an alternate space to help spread students out. And your second question, I'm sorry if you could just repeat it.
Absolutely. It's for students, and it could be elementary or secondary, that may be needing to go home because they're having symptoms, but they're still feeling well enough to participate. Will they be able to participate virtually with their classmates?
And I see Director Roberto has her hand up.
I noticed that as well. Go ahead, Director Roberto.
Sorry, thanks. And I also just wanted to add, at this point in time, I mentioned earlier that we'll have a guide for parents. In that guide, we'll also provide some visuals to give parents a feel for what the classrooms will look like and for the students so that they can see that. And so we'll be working on that in the coming weeks and making sure that at least we have a bit of a transition so that you can expect and see what the classroom will look like upon entry.
Okay, Trustee Gibson, did you have a follow-up?
No, just wondering still about the kids who may go home because they're positive, but they're feeling well enough to participate and how they'll participate.
So if they want to obviously return to in-person learning, probably the best option at that point, like I had mentioned in the presentation, is that we're still going to, even though they're in person, be basically training them towards a synchronous opportunity just in case we all have to move there. So it would be really important that their physical classroom homeroom teacher maintain contact with them, allow them to know what's happening, and as well connect with them virtually from the classroom, probably during language and mathematics and some of those subjects.
Okay, Trustee Gibson.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go through what I have written down here, and I'm going to ask Vice Chair Culver to help if I missed anybody, but I believe we have questions coming from Trustee Van Avery-Albert, Trustee Spears, Trustee Garbatti, and Trustee Dean. Are there others who would like to get onto the list? Okay, not seeing any. Trustee Slotin as well. Let's start in that order. Trustee Van Avery-Albert, please.
Okay, thank you. While I have many questions, I will speak about the three main ones right now. The first one has to do with devices for Six Nations students, and I'm still concerned about connectivity. I've had calls from people about connectivity, and those people want to do online learning. So I don't know if anybody can or wants to answer that right now, but that's a question that I would like an answer to in the days to come.
Not sure who we could get. I don't know if maybe Superintendent Martins perhaps might be able to answer that.
So Superintendent Monroe and I continue to work on the supports for all of our Indigenous students, Six Nations. We are just awaiting the outcome of the online surveys of our Six Nations students who had received the Android phones as their internet hotspot, for lack of a better word, so that we can work with Six Nations Mental Health, who we partnered with, to reactivate that connectivity for them on a by the Quadmester model and their declaration. The same is being had, that although we are not going to get additional phones if students are in that situation, that they need a connectivity and it is impaired because of towers on Six Nations or Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We would be looking at the iPads that Superintendent Monroe indicated to deploy to students who need them.
Keep going, Trustee Van Avery-Albert.
Okay, that partially answers my question, but I'll ask it again in another venue. The other thing is that, as you trustees may know, or they may not know, the elementary schools at Six Nations will not be opening for face-to-face. What they'll be doing is online. Now, I don't have all the details to that, but the questions that I have had from people at Six Nations is, has there been some discussion among the board staff about opening or closing the Grand Erie sites at Six Nations? If so, how is that going to work?
Again, Director Roberto, I'll address this one. The two Six Nations sites that are secondarily located are our Indigenous Alt Ed site and our Section 23 program at Turtle Lodge. And that principal and I have been working with our partners and our landlords around maintaining the opportunity for students to engage in those unique programming that aligns with what I've outlined for you. As a result of the decisions of Six Nations with respect to their elementary programming for their federal students, our Native advisor and the principal at Hagersville Secondary School are meeting with Six Nations Mental Health to discuss what that would look like and how we can continue those unique programs for those students at those locations.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt for a second just to review, and I know Trustee Van Avery, you have another question. I'll get to you in 2 seconds. I just want to review the order in which I'm going to go after Trustee Van Avery-Albert. I have trustee Spears and student trustee Garbatti, trustee Dean, trustee Sloat, trustee Worden, and student trustee Burtis. Are there other who would like to speak and ask questions other than those I mentioned? Okay, trustee Van Everett, one more, please.
Okay, third question. You've spoken of for the online education, the delivery, you've spoken of synchronous and asynchronous. My question in this area is there a percentage called for each type? I don't know if students can be on synchronous learning 300 minutes a day. I think that's far too much, but I suspect you've already talked about that. So do you have a percentage laid down?
So if I may, again, the ministry came out with a PPM on Thursday afternoon, PPM 164, with respect to requirements for remote learning. On the secondary level, it requires 60 minutes of instruction per course, or a maximum of 225. Because we are running two-period courses, each course that would be typically 2 periods for 150 minutes, 110 of that 150 minutes in a morning or an afternoon is designated to synchronous learning in the online model. And some of that might be through the blended learning model that Superintendent DeVos and Superintendent Monroe have worked through. Some of that might be individual conversations in small groups with that. It might not be all engaged with the teacher and everybody at the same time. And we will, leave that to the creativity and the working conditions for our teachers who are leading those classrooms. And our central teams, both at elementary and secondary, will be there to support them and provide the necessary resources and guides for them to complete that.
Okay. Did you want to jump in there, Superintendent DeVos? You look like you wanted to.
So I just wanted to mention for kindergarten, it would be 180 minutes of synchronous a day. But if you divide that into the 3 blocks in elementary, that would be an equivalent of 60 minutes for every 100-minute block. However, that 60 minutes could be really broken up. Like I said, a 10-minute introduction, then they do something and they're monitored in small groups or even individually. Like, it's not fully meant to be 180 minutes straight. There's no way our 4- and 5-year-olds can do that. And our educators don't teach that way in person. So they're not going to teach that way online either. I have a grandson starting. I know. I know when you first see it, it's frightening, but that's not what it means.
Thank you, Superintendent DeVos. I'm going to ask the trustees, when they ask, if you do know the superintendent you're aiming your question at, that would help identify so we could get that individual ready. So I'm going to go now to trustee Spears, please.
Thank you. All right, so I just wanted to say some of my questions have been answered by the really comprehensive presentation tonight, including the asynchronous part that you just broke down really amazingly. So I hope people did hear that and understand that. And I also wanted to point out that open concept schools, you said you were working with the health unit to look into that a little more. So I won't be able to ask that question either because you've addressed it. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that work. So the question I have is, if someone wants to transition from distance to in-person, will there be a wait list? Are they looking at a wait list potentially to go back to school in person based on those dates that you did show us in the presentation? That's one question. And I would ask that to, that's a good question. Anybody who's
Probably me. Thank you, Trustee Spears. No, there will not be a wait list. The only piece that we talked about were those dates. However, as I said, we can be flexible and look at every case individually. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, student trustee Garbatti has a question. Go ahead, please.
Can I ask more? I will be brief. Okay.
How about we let everybody have a chance to go through first, and then we'll come back to you, Trustee Spears. Trustee Garbatti, please.
Hello, thank you. Oh, sorry, my webcam's falling down here. So my question is about the policy with lockers. I noticed in the slideshow that it said we will not be using lockers. So my concern with that is, so are students expected now to carry their school bags with them into their classrooms? Where will they store their belongings? And I guess that would be to Superintendent Wazinski.
So our decision to close off lockers is just to reduce the amount of students' touch points with respect to being so close in the locker area, but also just to take as many students out of the hallways as possible. With respect to carrying their belongings, they will have to do that as though they don't have a locker. I mean, it'll have to be a transitional piece for students as well. And I mean, we can definitely work with our administrative team to try to best figure out a solution for that. But with respect to lockers, because of the high frequency of use and the touch points, we can't guarantee that reducing the COVID transmission can be accomplished. So that is the reason why we had to take lockers off. So there will be some challenges with respect to a number of things, but it'll have to be probably carrying it around.
Okay, a follow-up question, if I may, Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
So as far as I'm aware, it's always been a safety concern as well as a fire safety concern with having school bags in classrooms. And I know that, you know, especially in grades 11s and 12, the senior grades, they're carrying around a lot of binders, lunch, you know, laptops, whatever devices they have. And that's a lot of stuff for them to be carrying. So they're going to need a school bag per se. But how are we able to ensure the safety of students and what is in their bags if they're bringing them into the classrooms? Because like I said, they've always been stored away in their lockers.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that follow-up question. So we're hoping that the quadmester model will reduce the amount of items in a student's bag, but we can definitely take that question away and provide a more solidified answer for you, Zach.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Okay, I'm going to just make sure everybody knows the order. We're going to go Trustee Dean, Trustee Sloat, Trustee Worden, Trustee Burtis, Trustee Culver. Go ahead, Trustee Dean.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate the work that you're doing on this. We have a lot to owe our chair the last few weeks. So my question is for Raf. Has a decision been reached regarding the date for opening of buildings for community use? And if there hasn't been one set, have you any idea when it will be?
We have not yet made a decision on community use of schools for 2020, 2021, but we are hoping to make a decision on it this week.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Trustee Sloat, please. You're muted, Caroline.
There it is. It's very slow tonight. Thank you, Trustee Anderson. I have a few questions as always, so I'll ask a few of them, maybe tack on at the end. Superintendent Wazinski mentioned water fountains just there at the last minute. I didn't see that in our slides. I mean, sorry, is that just the water fountains or is that water filling stations? How are we going to ensure hydration for the students?
Yeah, so I was just speaking to drinking fountains. The
Okay.
bottling fountains will still be available to students and staff.
Okay, and then a question from parents about cafeterias. We were talking about being open for putting students in, like for spares and that sort of thing, but will it be open for food? Because also in the FAQ is students will be required to remain on school property for the entire day. And well, that would be what, is that that's just a tough job to manage. So just wondering the thoughts around, is there cafeteria food and how will we ensure the students stay on site for an hour at lunchtime?
So with respect to cafeterias, we know that we are working with our partners to see what types of grab and go models we can do to provide, again, nutrition for students. Maybe one of my other colleagues can tackle the piece of what happens during that hour lunch.
I'll throw that to either Superintendent Martins or Superintendent Monroe. Go ahead.
Trustee Sloth, right now, the plan is to have and encourage students and staff to bring their own lunches and their snacks and water filling stations, so as not to have cafeteria services until we meet that public health threshold, and in partnership with some of our schools who deliver their own lunch programs, as well as our catering partners. We're working on that. The other thing we are doing, and this is under Superintendent Baker, is he's been working with our nutrition program partners for grab and go, but not just grab and go in the morning as a snack part, but also expanding the food groups and how we can enrich that opportunity with our public health and those organizations to have a more fulsome opportunity for students to be fed and nourished while at school, and we're not able to run that service for startup. As to keeping students in school, that's going to be one of our greatest challenges. You know, in looking at what a lunch hour looks like in a secondary school, trying to minimize that as best we can, and as you know, we have collective agreements we have to adhere to. And, you know, hoping the good weather stays with us as long as possible for some outside breaks, etc. But we all know that if students leave school property and go elsewhere, it compromises the integrity of our cohorts and the health and safety of themselves, their classmates, their families, their teachers, and all of those expanded social groups. So we're really counting on the opportunity that secondary students have missed the opportunity to be in school, and that they can live through this difficult timeline of sticking it out in the building during those periods of time, so that we can all be safe and make good decisions.
Thanks, Superintendent Martins. I believe Superintendent Baker, you might have had something to add to this as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. Superintendent Martins did a good job explaining the support that's going to be given by Brant Food for Thought in Brant County and the Child Nutrition Network in Haldeman, Norfolk. The two organizations are well aware of the challenges that are being faced in schools, in secondary schools right now, with cafeterias not being open. Actually, I'm going to be following up with them in a meeting on Wednesday to talk about some of those options, but they have made it abundantly clear that they're going to be flexible in supporting our secondary school students.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Trustee Slow, does that take any of your questions for this moment at least?
For now, yeah, I'll go back on the list, please.
Okay, all right, let's go. Trustee Worden, then Trustee Burtis, then Trustee Culver. Trustee Worden, please.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I just first of all like to thank the senior team for putting together such a superb and excellent map for us to move forward. I know it's going to be a fluid one and we're going to keep moving forward, but in the amount of time you've had to do it, it's just a superb piece. One question I've had, and it's probably a specific case where a parent has called me, is that if we've got 3 children at home and they have 1 computer, are we able to supply them with 2 other devices so that all 3 can be on learning at the same time if they are required to stay home for online learning?
Hi, I'll take that one, Director Roberto. At this time, Trustee Worden, we currently only have the resources to support 1 device per family. As I mentioned in our presentation, we have depleted grade 2 to grade 7 computers to support the 1,850 families that do not have their device. That being said, our goal is to support the achievement of all students. So you mentioned that this is one email that you've received, and my recommendation would be for that family to reach out to the school, and so that we can problem solve what some of those next steps will be so that we can support those students' achievement.
Thanks, Trustee Worden. A further question that you have, or you're good with that? You're fine?
No, I'll get back to the family because they've got 2 secondary students and an elementary that requires a lot of hours and a lot of minutes online, and there's an immune compromised situation there that all the medical advice is to stay home. So they're in dire need of the 2 extra devices, and hopefully there'll be enough bandwidth to make them all work.
Thanks, Trustee Worden. Okay, I'd like to introduce our newest trustee, Trustee Burtis, student trustee. You now have the floor if you'd like to ask your question.
Hi, thank you. My question is in reference to students leaving school property during lunch or break time. If students are allowed to do so, what protocols will be in place in regard to sanitization upon their return to school property? I'm not sure who that question could be directed to.
It's a good question.
Sounds like it's sort of a health and safety question, so I'll take a shot at it. If they are re-entering the school, they were required to sanitize their hands. We're still working with public health to see if they'll have to complete a secondary self-assessment for their symptoms.
Thank you.
But I think that is going to be very difficult for, I think, the principals of our secondary school to monitor, but that's a good question. Trustee Culver, and then I'm going to open it up to further questions. Trustee Culver?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So I don't know if we've had any thinking yet, but around our first day of school, parents are inquiring, will they know their teacher or class before the first day of school? Will they be informed?
I'm going to ask perhaps okay, go ahead, Superintendent DeVos.
I'll jump in. In the presentation, I talked about the importance of communication, and Trustee Colbert, that would be one thing. Families and students have been away from school for a very long time, so that is crucial to that initial relationship building. As you know, not everyone can come in person, including the parents, so all of those ways that we can reach out and make sure that families are reassured and that their questions are answered. And that would be one thing. Who is their teacher? Of critical importance.
Thank you.
Whether it's in person or online.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Trustee Keller.
So lots of chatter out there, and I was wondering if we've had any consideration on our delayed start. Looking at the first day of school, September 8th, half the school participating, September 9th, the other half participating, September 10th, all in. I wonder if there's been any thought around delayed re-entry.
I think the director would like to address that. Trustee Culver, go ahead, Director Roberto.
Thank you very much. As I indicated earlier this evening, our reopening plans are very fluid, and based on our information that we did receive last week, we will be looking at that, and in the coming weeks, hopefully sooner rather than later, we will take an opportunity once we put our parent and staff guides out to look at what that could look like. In particular, once we also receive who will be returning and who will be going into a virtual classroom, and then we will communicate a potential staggered re-entry. So that's where we are right now, and that is one of our commitments, that if we have any changes in the next little while, that we will make sure our community and our families are aware of that.
Thanks, Director. Did you have a follow-up question, Trustee Culver?
I'm good right now, Chair Anderson. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to start a new list. I just want to make sure. I see we have Trustee Gibson, and I believe we also have Trustee Garbatti, I believe, a second time. I'm just going to ask you, a couple of trustees have not asked a question. I'm just going to put it out. If you'd like to, let me know at this time. Otherwise, I'll go to people with the second one. Trustee
Greg,
Dixon,
I think that Trustee Spears had another question as well.
Right. I'm going to get to the second in a second. I just want to make sure Trustee Dixon and Trustee Richardson and Trustee Doyle did not feel okay. All right. I've got Trustee Gibson, Trustee Spears, and Trustee Garbatti so far. Are there others who would like to address? Trustee Sloat? Any further? Okay. Trustee Van Eerby Albert. And okay, let's start. Trustee Gibson, go ahead.
So I'm going to put my nurse cap back on and going to ask a question. If one child in the home has symptoms, would all children in that home, so we could have students that are in elementary school, an older sibling in high school, would they all be expected to be excluded if there were symptoms from one student? I think that's probably for Superintendent Wazinski.
Yes, I believe our interpretation of close contact would be that would be one that would qualify as close contact. So they would need to stay home until everybody in the household has proven to have no symptoms and does not test positive.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Spears. Okay. You're muted.
Hi.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about, this is for Raf, I think. What is enhanced PPE and how does that relate to the plexiglass barriers? I think you had spoken briefly about plexiglass barriers. I'm just curious to know what those two things are.
Yep, so enhanced PPE could include anything beyond a face covering or goggles. It could be a face shield, it could be a helmet, it could be gloves, it could be a gown. It could be a number of things that are above and beyond what we've mentioned is the basic requirement for situations where physical distancing can't be maintained, the 2 meters. The plexiglass is a piece of vertical glass that will be installed at high visitation points, such as reception, but also at guidance areas. In addition, we'll be providing schools with portable plexiglass stations so that they can be moved or shared, obviously disinfected in between each sharing. But there may be situations where 2 people need to be in a close room. We'll try to bring the portable plexiglass piece in to help support and facilitate the services that we're trying to provide.
Okay, Trustee Spears, do you have a follow-up? You're okay? Okay, I'm just going to review. I've got student trustees Arbati, Trustee Sloat, Trustee Van Every-Albert, and Trustee Doyle. So go ahead, student trustee, please. Go ahead, Zach.
Yep. So I've received quite an amount of questions from students regarding extracurriculars, whether that be sports or clubs like student council. There's been a lot of talk, and I know myself, I haven't heard a definite answer what the conclusion is on if they will be running, how they will be running. So I was just looking if I could have a definite answer on how they will be operating this year. And I don't know who that would be directed to.
Superintendent Martins, would you like to address that?
Certainly. As noted in the FAQ that was posted last week, Wednesday, athletics in secondary and elementary schools will not be running for the fall season. OFSA, our provincial athletic organizing body, sent out a communication late last week indicating that all championships and festivals are canceled for the fall season, and they will be revisiting the winter and spring sports events. So that is with respect to athletics. With respect to extracurricular activities, in the Ministry of Education guideline, it talks about allowing that to occur where opportunities and physical distancing and all of those things come into play. And I think, to be candid, that's something that is going to evolve once we get back into school. As you can see, certainly from the secondary template or timetable and the elementary timetable, we're trying to keep people where they are and not crossing those cohorts, for student council. So we're hoping really that some of those things, and we know student politicians and student council are critical for the student voice in all of our schools, both elementary and secondary. And we're hoping that those students can meet virtually with their staff advisors to look at some of those things to start. And as we build on our momentum and success, that we can build those extracurricular activities into it, because we know that that is what makes the big difference and is a critical part to both an elementary and a secondary school experience. And, in our FAQ, it talks about individual schools, depending upon that, how they roll those things out and how things are going there. So we would encourage, students and parents to be patient and see how things are, and then ask for those questions about opportunities virtually, and then potential small group meetings that maintain all of the COVID requirements as we move through the next coming months from a secondary perspective. I don't know if my colleague in elementary wants to add anything, but there's the secondary lens.
I don't know, perhaps Superintendent Baker?
I would suggest that it's a similar situation to what Superintendent Martins has said. I think that if in certain situations all of the social distancing and safety precautions could be put in place, whatever they can put together at an individual school would be supported certainly by the superintendent, along with running it past the officer of health.
Thanks. Does that help you out a bit, Trustee Garbati?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, we have Trustee Sloats and Van Avery Albert, then Doyle. Go ahead, Trustee Sloats.
Thank you very much. And I did neglect to say thank you to staff for working so hard all summer. I know they have been on a very fluid situation. And I think some of the questions are maybe helping from us to help just to see where the issues are from parents and from staff. Mine are two more secondary questions, if I may. Do we think co-op education will be able to occur? Because a lot of students really like that experiential learning, and since it's post-secondary, could I have a quick understanding of how the quadmester I understand, but just how staffing works? Is it a teacher, usually secondary teachers are 3 out of 4? Will it be like they teach all period 1A, 1B, and 2A, 2B first semester, and then only teach 1A, 1B second semester? So second quadmester, if I could get a understanding. I realize it's still a work in progress. Thank you.
So if I could talk about teacher staffing, and I'll ask Superintendent Sidsbox to jump in if he sees fit. We are still working with our OSSTF partners in what those models of delivery would be. But exactly, if a teacher is full-time and they typically would teach 3 out of 4 courses in a semester, there will be one quadmester where they are scheduled to teach 2, and one where they're scheduled to teach 1 and have their prep supervision and on-calls. We are trying to find ways to work with our partners around adhering to the collective agreements and we know the value and the importance of co-op opportunities for our students in secondary schools. We are doing everything we can to prepare COVID pre-assessments, to work with co-op teachers, and the Ontario Co-op Education Association is putting out some documents. Many of the pre-assessment and placement pieces, we are probably going to look at a virtual perspective of getting that up and running. And our team, meaning our central team, our experiential learning team, our co-op team, will work with teachers and public health to make sure that, all of the conditions with respect to our expectations from an educational perspective, but also the expectations of those work placements meet the standards and criteria for our students. Many resources have been developed in this area over the course of the last 6 months, and members of our school and our board teams have been active in the development of those. So we really hope to be able to offer, although not a fulsome co-op program, a co-op program that still brings meaning and experiential opportunities for our secondary students.
Thanks very much. We do have quite a list of speakers still. I'm just going to go through the order I have. Trustee Van Avery Albert will be next, then Trustee Doyle and Trustee Richardson, then Trustee Dixon. There are other speakers who would like to talk. Okay, we'll start with Trustee Van Avery Albert, please.
Okay. Being a former teacher myself, I'm well aware of the amount of work that it takes to get ready for school in the fall. And with this added difficulty, I know the staff must be just working their fingers through the bone. So from me, a former teacher, to you, the staff, I just want to give a big nyawagoa, and that means thank you very much, because I know the amount of work that you are and have put in to date, and I know what's coming. as we head into the school year. So I think it's really important that we recognize the tough job that is ahead for all of us. I have a number of questions, but I think that what I'll do is just send an email, and I hope that somebody can take the time to answer those questions for me. I don't want to take too much of your time because I know how busy you are. So, Neil, we'll go with thank you very much and good luck.
Thanks, Trustee Van Ray-Albert, and I'm sure they will receive your questions, and I'm sure you'll get them answered. Thank you. Trustee Doyle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I want to thank our new director and staff and superintendents for stepping up at this time. These are very, very, very unusual times, and I'm still stuck back on that your backpack. I'm just imagining all the clutter, but trying to remove clutter from the class. Just my bag in.
Okay, we're losing your vocal there, Mr. Richard. Excuse me, Trustee Doyle. I think your question was about the backpacks and the clutter that might be in the secondary rooms. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the whole lunch idea. There's a lot of students that always went home for lunch. They live very close to the school, and with no cafeteria open, what do they all have to bring food?
Okay, I'm not sure who wants to try and answer that one. Trustee Baker, or excuse me, Superintendent Baker, I see you have a hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. Actually, I was going to address Trustee Garbati's question, except I was a little bit slow on the. So I have some experience with the fire department with respect to this. Back in the days when kids were carrying backpacks that were actually too big to fit into lockers. Some of you educators might remember those days. Kids were carrying their backpacks into classrooms with them. And I, as the principal of school, actually called the fire department to say, tell me about this. I'm a little bit concerned myself, as the person in charge of safety in this building. And the way that they explained it to me was that as long as there is a means of egress, in other words, a pathway to the exit, in other words, a clear pathway to the door for every student, that's what qualifies as a safe situation. So that doesn't speak to how much they might be bringing in, but as long as that condition can be maintained, at least that used to be the standard, then that would be okay.
Thanks, Superintendent Baker. I think I'm going to refer to Superintendent Wazinski to respond to Trustee Doyle, which I believe we're losing some of the audio, but it sounded like he was concerned about the size of the backpacks as well as the absence of a cafeteria.
Yeah, for the backpacks, it's definitely an item that we'll have to take away just to make sure that we have the proper wording and protocol in place to ensure and safety for students, but also to reduce that COVID transmission. With respect to the cafeteria, Trustee Doyle, can you provide some additional clarity on what you're trying to ask? Are you asking about how we're going to utilize our cafeteria for lunches?
Yes. Are we going to the students eating in the cafeteria? And would that be the whole school at once or half an hour? And if there's no food for them to buy, then everything has to be brought in. And a lot of students have the luxury of going home for lunch, and that's not the case now.
Maybe I can help you, Superintendent Wazinski, with that.
Sure.
In the secondary model, given the volume and number of students included in there, it is our hope that perhaps for our junior students, grade 9 and 10, the opportunity to have their lunches in their classroom before they get some fresh air outside on the school grounds will be provided, provided we have the requisite supervision to have that happen in grade 9 and 10 classes, and that the senior students would eat their lunches they bring from home in the cafeteria, again with supervision. The other things we're looking at is that I provided a sample timetable, but we are presenting the opportunity to provide staggered lunches for different grades, or in that model, should we not be able to have the appropriate supervision or space, or cleaning follow-up with our custodial partners. So really thinking outside the box, and again, working with our school teams and our administrators who know their schools the best about what might work in terms of that model. And being a former secondary principal, backpacks are great to hang on the back of chairs and not be on floors. That a chair is like your back. It has two parts that it hangs over, so that helps address some of our fire safety code issues. And, going back to something Zach asked about too is students aren't going to be leaving their backpacks there because unfortunately they're not going to be going many places during the school day. But as always, we would ask parents and students to label all their belongings that they bring with them to school so that they're clearly outlined and available for you.
Okay, thanks, Superintendent. We do have a series of questions. I'm going to go through the order that I have currently. We have Trustee Richardson, then Trustee Dixon, Trustee Sloat, and Trustee Burtis. So go ahead, Trustee Richardson, please. I think you have to unmute there, Trustee Richardson. Perfect. Go ahead.
There we go. I enjoy the words nimble and flexible. I've heard them a few times, and I think that's going to be an ongoing theme. I guess you mentioned for the online students in the secondary panel, their teacher may be from anywhere in the board. What about for students in the elementary panel? Will that be their homeroom teacher, or will that be a teacher from anywhere in the board?
So thank you, Trustee Richardson. In elementary, it will be the same. We will have a virtual Grand Dairy school. So if Linda is a grade 4 student, she may be in that virtual school with other grade 4 students from across the board with a different teacher.
Okay. You satisfied with that, Trustee Richardson, or do you have further? Good. All right. Trustee Dixon, please.
My concern is, what about if one of the teachers gets the virus and has to go home for at least 2 weeks? What happens, like all the students that have been in her class? I'm just concerned what's going to happen.
Hi, Trustee Dixon. So that's something that would fall under our outbreak protocol, and we would wait to hear from public health on guidance on next steps, because there's a number of items in terms of isolation, monitoring, and contact tracing that we would need to help them in terms of supporting the next steps. They may close the classroom, they may close the cohort, and depending on the severity of the outbreak, they may close the school.
Okay, you good with that, Trustee Dixon? Good, thank you. Okay, Trustee Sloat, please.
Thank you for being very patient with us tonight. Just back to secondary again, it was the tech studies that was touched on by, I think, Superintendent Martins. Just thinking about things like the food programs and that sort of stuff, because some of our cafeterias are a food program. That's your specialist high schools major, and that happens with 4 of our. But we have classes that have food courses at other high schools. So just wondering, will they be? That's still a work in progress to work on these more hands-on classes. Thank you.
So, certainly for our food program, students are going to have the opportunity to prepare food for themselves, working in, small groups or individually. They will not be providing or creating food for the general population for lunch service or delivery. So we are trying to work within some very tight parameters to allow individual project and maybe some at-home work through blended learning and creations of things at home that were tried during our distance learning that will allow those opportunities. But hospitality is very unique. And you're correct. That has been the mainstay for some of our programs, for lunch programs. And that's why, we're looking at really encouraging students and staff to bring their lunches, and, partnering with our nutrition program to provide food for those kids who need it.
Well,
Okay.
and I think we just have to say that it's going to be all of us working together. The students are going to have to be flexible as well with the parents and the staff and everybody. And I think we're all going to work well together. Thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Sloan. Okay, I'm going to cut you off there because I have quite a list still. I have Trustee Burtis, then Trustee Worden, Trustee Gibson, Trustee Richardson at this point, and I'm sure we'll have more. Trustee Burtis, go ahead, please.
Hi. Will there be hand washing stations in the school separate from those in the washrooms? And if not, will those hand washing procedures be implemented and monitored, or will it be only sanitization procedures which are required?
Superintendent Wazinski?
Yeah, so our goal is to have not only the washrooms with being the only area to be able to wash your hands, but any available sinks that we can add soap, we will. In addition to hand sanitizers, like the hand pumps being available in every classroom, plus other designated spaces across elementary and secondary schools that make it a good spot, such as the entryway, reception areas, and so on and so forth.
Okay, Trustee Burtis, did you have a follow-up?
No, that's it.
Okay, Trustee Worden, then Trustee Gibson, then Trustee Richardson. Go ahead, Trustee Worden.
I'll pass to Trustee Gibson.
All righty, thank you. Trustee Gibson.
Thanks. I'm putting my nurse hat back on again. So for some students and some staff, they may have underlying conditions that would cause them to fail the screener. So I'm just wondering, when they're doing that screening, what is the process for them, and who will they discuss their situations to make sure that they are failing the screener because of an underlying condition and that it's not COVID related? Sorry, that's for Superintendent Wazinski, and I recognize that it might be more of a public health question.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. It's likely more for public health, given that every student or every staff member's underlying condition could make them more riskier for transmission, but also may still make them not allowable to attend school.
Thanks.
And will that be something that the public health nurses that I know public health is looking to hire, which may be a while, is that something that they would be involved with?
We're hopeful. We haven't heard necessarily how the 500 provincial nurses yet are going to help our school board.
And just a reminder to trustees and anybody that's listening, I think it's 500 nurses across the entire province. There's more than 5,000 schools in the province. So it's safe to assume we are not going to be having a nurse per school. It's very clear that won't be happening. And I also think it's also important to realize that we do have public health. We do have to work with our public health partners, and there are protocols that they will dictate to us when there's any type of outbreak. So we would be following along their direction, because as a school system, we have to work hand in hand with the health department. Trustee Richardson.
Yeah, I've actually got two separate questions, if I may.
Certainly.
First one, I don't intend this to be a conflict of interest, but I've had the question from some providers. We're assuming there will be no class trips for elementary students this fall.
Defer to the director, I think, on that one. You're muted, Director Roberto.
At this time, they will be all on pause, and then we will again reassess those pieces as we move forward.
Okay, second question.
Thank you. In this one, I just had it emailed to me. In the secondary panel, will the students be with the same kids for the two classes, or are they apart? Two separate groups?
Maybe to Superintendent Martins, perhaps?
Certainly, they will be in two separate groupings, which in terms of our max class cap size would very easily keep us under the 100 max cohort allowed in secondary schools. So they would be in their morning class with a group, which may have some of the same students in their afternoon class, but potentially different. So we've, taken the highest level of opportunity for those students to associate in cohort.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up?
Yes, and will desks be wiped down between the two classes at lunchtime?
I think Ms. Superintendent Wazinski, perhaps.
Thank you, Trustee Richardson. Yes, our intent is to have the desks wiped between cohorts. We're just looking to see how that will be operationalized.
Okay, perfect. I think we have a question now from Trustee Garbati. Go ahead.
Hi, just a quick question regarding evaluations and how that's going to work. So now that we've moved to a quadmester system, are we having exams at the end of each quadmester? And how is it going to work with students that are in school taking these exams? Sorry, I'm referring to secondary schools for this question.
Yep.
So how is it going to work for students that are in class doing these exams versus online? How are we able to ensure that, there's no cheating or anything like that?
So thanks. That's a great question, Zach. So our assessment and evaluation, we're really working with our secondary teachers, but also our elementary teachers on looking at overall expectations and working on our final evaluation and examination guideline that we have in Grand Erie that does not determine that 30% summative evaluation at the end of a course that has to be through an examination. So we are really building upon the opportunities that presented themselves this spring with us to come up with final evaluations for that. And we do have examinations scheduled into each quadmester. So you'd have a mid-quad report, a final quad report with some exam days included in there for the 1 or 2 periods. With respect to the online learning component, Grand Erie has successfully been running and participating in the Ontario Education Learning e-learning consortium for years, for where evaluations, that 30% or a breakdown of it has successfully occurred online. There is some proctoring factors that the homeschool of the students usually taking that have that opportunity. So we do have experience in that, and we will navigate through that for any students who are in online and are required to complete part of their 30% for that culminating through an examination.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Martins. Zach, are you comfortable with those?
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, I cannot believe this, but I do not have anybody in line for questions. So is there someone else who would like to ask a question? I've hit a new record. We've got over 30. I just want to point that out. I've been keeping track here. So I'm not going to ask any questions. I think we've got many of them covered. They've been good questions. So no further discussion.
Greg, could I just say one thing?
Certainly. Go ahead, Trustee Dean.
I would just like to compliment our student trustees on the quality of their questions and their thoughtfulness for their colleagues in school.
I would concur.
They served their people very well tonight. Thank you.
Yep, I would agree. You're correct. Trustee Gibson, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think we probably all have a few more questions that will come in from partners and parents and teachers. So if we can just continue to farm those out to our very helpful superintendents who have been quick to answer the questions that we've been getting.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to do one last time. Are there any further speakers? Okay, we need a motion. Sorry?
Sorry, Greg. I don't have my hand up. Just to touch on Trustee Gibson there, the Q&A on our website will be updated regularly. So we encourage parents to always go back and check to see if their question is there. And if not, please submit it. We certainly do want to hear their voices and the staff as well. But that Q&A will be updated on a regular basis.
Thanks. That's a good point, Trustee Culver. And just a reminder to all those that are watching that clearly we do have a couple of weeks till school opens. I think our directors made it very clear that this is fluid. I think it's safe to say that we do have a plan. We are certainly looking out for the obvious safety of all our staff and our students. We're in very uncertain times. So a lot of these things, obviously, we've never been through this before. So clearly, I think the trustees have asked some outstanding questions tonight, but I want to concur with others that have said this already. Thank you to all the senior men for the report. It was very, very well put together. I'm going to ask now if we have a mover and a seconder to receive this report. I have Trustee Dixon and Trustee Spears. Anybody opposed to approving that we receive this? Hearing none, that is approved. It has been received. Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda would be the return to in-person board meeting plan and protocols. And I'll throw this to our director.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. This evening in our report, we're presenting to the Board of Trustees the opportunity to return back to the Grand Erie District School Board boardroom to hold our meetings. At this point in time, I'd like to provide you with some information that I have gathered in working with the Medical Officer of Health here in Brant. And for us to return to the board meeting at the end of the month, we could accommodate 50 people. However, we will have to encourage the masking and social distancing. Our room in particular, with the amount of people that we have in there, is 24, and we will not be able to honor the 2-meter physical distancing in the existing boardroom that we have. So the additional item of equipment that we would have to have would be that we would also need to have our eye protection if we were to all go back into that room, which would be 24 of us in that room. So that's where we are right now. I wanted to provide you with that option moving forward. I know some of us will continue in a virtual space, but that would not allow all of us to be there in a 2-meter distancing situation. So that's the information that I have at this point in time that I wanted to share with you.
Okay, I know we're going to have some questions. I have a couple. Trustee Culver first, please.
Well, just for clarification, as we all sit here virtually, to why we're talking about sending staff and students back to school while we all sit here virtually. And I just wanted to state that staff were extremely busy to ensure that the safety and the health of our students and staff, and the protocol for trustees moving back into the boardroom was not a top priority. So this is our first opportunity to talk about those priorities. So this is why we are still virtual tonight. So Director Roberto spoke about the boardroom being maybe a little too small. Could we look at the option of moving over to Joe Brandt?
Yes. In fact, our team has looked at that as the second option. So we would be able to, if you'd like, I could bring that information forward to arrange for our board meetings to be held in the Joseph Brandt room, and we would set that up. The audio and technology obviously needs to be reviewed in that space, but we can bring that back, and we would all be able to be in that space together. In terms of audience and delegations at that time, we would most likely be doing that through Microsoft Teams.
Okay, I do have a series of speakers. I just want to identify who they are. We have Trustee Gibson, Trustee Spears, Trustee Van Albert, Trustee Richardson. And before we start, I'd just like to get my 2 cents worth in here and suggest one of the reasons we thought about having an in-person meeting was for the reasons that Trustee Culver said. We thought if kids are going back and staff's going back, we should, but clearly we do have to recognize our safety protocols. So I think it's really advisable that we do get a report which can give us this information. And a suggestion from Trustee Culver is a good one, potentially using the Joe Brandt because of the space that's available. We would obviously be able to sit far enough apart that we would not need the eye protection. You'd certainly need masks to come in and out of the facility, but that is certainly something we could look at. So I'm hesitant to have us rush into a decision tonight. I think it's clearly we have questions, and perhaps we'll get a further report at our regular board meeting at the end of the month. But I would like it now to take some questions. Trustee Gibson first.
So I absolutely support coming back. I think if our staff and our students are going to be together, we all need to be together as well, knowing that there may be some with underlying health conditions who will not. And I'm just wondering what kind of technology. I think we've had a few challenges with working on Teams with connectivity, and certainly in past meetings where we've had some of us in the room and some of us online. So just wondering if there are other ability to have the people that are offline on one screen and being able to see all of us in the room rather than us all being on our computers, because I think that's going to be a little bit challenging.
Thank you, Trustee Gibson. Trustee Spears. Trustee Spears, you have to unmute.
No, I know it takes me 2 seconds. So if I'm wearing eye protection, like, can I take the mask option away if I have the face shield? Is my question, because I'm questioning wearing a mask and a face shield or eye protection. Can I just supersede that with the mask, with the shield? Excuse me.
I'll throw that question to either the director or Superintendent Wazinski, either one.
If we are in the boardroom as it exists, the requirements are that it's a medical mask level 1 and the eye protection. That's if we're in our boardroom. If we're not, and the will of the board is that we actually explore the opportunity to have it next door, then we would be able to just have our masks. The other question that I do want to address, Trustee Gibson, is the question with respect to technology. Again, I can include that in the next report, and that would provide you with an overview of the existing technology in audio and the option of enhanced technology in audio that we would need to look at in order to support some of those concerns that you raised from your previous board meetings. And we can include that into the report for you.
Okay, I do see we have more questions, so I'm going to continue with Trustee Van Avery-Albert, followed by Trustee Richardson. Go ahead.
I don't really have a question. I would just like to remind people that I have a medically depressed immune system. Yeah. And so I really cannot attend until I get a vaccine. However, I really would like to see everybody face to face, and maybe I'll stop by and look at you when you're going in.
Okay.
I miss you all.
We will look after you, Trustee Van Avery-Albert. We want you, obviously, to be part of this as well. Okay, I do have further questions. I have Trustee Richardson and Sloat and Culver. Go ahead, Trustee Richardson.
Yeah, have physical barriers like plexiglass barriers been considered between our chairs? I know in some of our workstations we've installed those where workers are facing the same direction.
I'll throw that to either the director or the superintendent of business.
Raf, do you want to address that? At this point in time, we did not explore that, and I believe it's due to the setup of the table, but I'll leave that to you, because we can include that if we need to in our next report as an option.
Yeah, we definitely can. There would be an investment that would be required, and we would also see what type of, if there would be any permanent changes to the existing board table as it is, because we're not sure if we have to go left and right coverage or if there would have to be some front coverage as well. Again, the goal is to reduce the possible transmission of COVID-19. So having, reducing the amount of masks just creates that additional airflow. So you can definitely look into it if trustees.
Thank you. Trustee Richards, do you have a follow-up, or is that your question?
That's my question. I'm getting really good at building barriers, though.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Trustee Sloat and Trustee Culver.
Okay, thank you. Just the eye protection. I guess that one just sort of surprised me, because you don't hear about usually when you're talking about, anything. I mean, some places have just face shields because of masks and stuff like that. So is that a public health requirement because we can't keep 2 meters? Because I'm just trying to understand where that comes from.
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's new to
so
me.
We had that room assessed for that purpose, and those are the items that they provided and suggested.
Because that room is only weighted for with the number of chairs we can put in there, because it's fire rating. There's only 24 people at the back, so almost at 50, before that. The other question I'm just confused about, I thought we were hoping to go back live together in person August 31st. So And you mentioned another report coming. Can you help me to understand, please, either Director or Chair Anderson, please?
Well, I'll jump in first. I think it was ambitious to think we could get back as a group tonight and taking the 31st. But I think we have to make darn sure we're following all the protocols. I would like to get back together. I think it's critical that we're back together once our students and staff are in, and they would not be obviously in until at least the staff wouldn't be until the 1st. So I think we have the potential for one more of these virtual meetings till we get an absolute report and make a decision how we want to proceed. I would not want to jump into this without really thinking of the options. And there will be some cost, obviously, as well. So in answer to your question, Trustee Sloat, I think this is a maybe right now about the 31st. I think we need further information.
Well, will the board need to meet in between now and August 31st? Because things are, I realize staff has got last Thursday with, pages of PPMs and everything else.
Yeah.
And there's another report coming this Wednesday, according to the minister. So
I think it's quite possible.
Yeah, we
it's
may
quite
be meeting
possible.
again next Monday. Thank you.
We may very well be. So, okay, I think we have Director Roberta, did you want to jump in there as well? No? No, okay. All right, Trustee Culver, then Trustee Gibson.
So Trustee Sloat just threw a wrench in my motion. So I don't know if we were going to try and go live August 31st, but I want to make a motion. I would like to make a motion about requesting senior men bring back a report to the board on enhanced technology and video, and the option of holding our meetings at Joe Brandt. I prefer the August 31st meeting for that report.
Okay, now Lisa, were you able to pick up the gist of that? Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Okay, but the gist of her message is to look for a report to come to our August 31st meeting to look at possible moving to Joe Brandt and possible costs or improvements that might be necessary. Now, I made it very wordy, but we do need a seconder if we want to discuss this. Can I have a seconder, please? Anybody?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Trustee Gibson. Okay. Lisa Howells, did you get the gist of that?
No, I didn't. Sorry.
Okay. Do you want to try it again, Trustee Culver, or spell it out a bit, please?
That the Grand Erie District School Board directs senior men to bring a report to the August 31st, 2020 board meeting on enhanced technology and video and the moving our board to the Joe Brandt Center.
Okay, I think we have some questions. First of all, Trustee Sloat, please go ahead.
Thank you. I guess, I want to go back in person and I want to make it the best possible for the people that can't come back in person and for, if we need to go live and that sort of stuff. But is that time frame going to work? Because staff has got a lot of things and, there should be more time placed on student and staff getting back in the building and I guess I don't want to take any time away because I don't know how long it's going to take and how much work has been done already, because we have discussed this a few times because the phone system is not the best in the world for calls, especially in cameras. So is this the best time to do this, to get a report that would, that's going to take staff resources to do so? That's all, respectfully, because I respect the work you're doing and the amount of time you put into all this already. Thank you.
Okay, I'll throw that to the director.
Thank you. We do have the majority of the information. The staff has been working on that. So we will refine that and add in some of those added costs that you asked with respect to the technology. And we'll also consider Trustee Richardson's request as well to see if that could be an additional accommodation. And if that is, then we'll bring both of those pieces forward for you on the 31st of August.
Thanks, Director. And I understand your concerns, Trustee Sloat. I also recognize that we're in very strange times right now, and I think we have to be cautious. Okay, do we have further speakers to this? The motion would be, Lisa, do you have, can you read back what we've got?
That the Grand Erie District School Board directs senior admin to bring back a report to the August 31st, 2020 board meeting, including enhanced technology. I have to get the rest of the wording later, but that's the gist of it.
But the gist of it is we will be looking at the feasibility of moving over to Joe Brandt and possible costs involved. I think that's the gist of it, if I could paraphrase that a bit. And do we have further speakers to this? Okay, I'm going to call the motion now. How many people are opposed to going forth with this? Not seeing any. That is carried, so we will expect a report on that, and that would be very helpful for us to make a decision. I think it's critical that we have made a decision this month so that we can proceed in September in a capacity that, you know, we're either one place or the other. We've made a decision how we're doing that. Thank you for putting that together, Trustee Culver. Okay. We still need to receive, I guess we do. We need to receive the in-person meeting report. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Trustee Dixon and Trustee Van Avery Albert. Anybody opposed to receiving the report the director brought us? Not seeing any. That is also carried. Okay, Superintendent Baker, please, the revised school year calendars.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Before trustees tonight are the 2020-21 school year calendars, possibly the most reviewed and revised calendars in history. I remind trustees that on July, there was an earlier version of revised calendars, and at that time it established the school year as starting on September the 1st, as per ministry directive, as well as putting 3 PA days before the arrival of the students. So those were the two changes with the last revisions. Since July 8th, there have been 2 communications from the ministry, and they've resulted in 2 changes. The one direction from the ministry was that the PA day descriptors for September the 1st to the 3rd should cover certain areas, and those the wording specifically from the communication is now on the 2 attached revised calendars that are included in this package. The second communication directed boards to establish for secondary schools the quadmester model, and Superintendent Martins spoke to that earlier on. I would direct trustees to that secondary calendar, since that's a more significant change, and just speak to the fact that while there have been changes to it to reflect the quadmester versus semester system, much of the information remained the same. There's still 194 school days in the year. The semesters are each at 97 days. There's still 187 instructional days, of which 10 are exam days, and there are still 7 PA days. The most significant difference is that the exam days, which traditionally had been 5 at the end of each semester, have been changed in order that they form the last 2 or 3 days of each of the quadmesters. So the 10 exam days are split among the 4 quadmesters. And really, that's probably about all there is at this point, unless there are some questions from trustees.
Okay, thank you very much, Superintendent Baker. Are there any questions for trustees? Don't see any. Can I get a mover, please, to receive this as information? Thank you, Trustee Richardson. Trustee Spears seconds it. Anybody opposed to approving this? That carries. Thank you very much, Superintendent Baker. And I believe now we have Trustee Culver, please.
It's okay, Chair Anderson. We've moved on.
Okay, fair enough. That's good. I think we will still do that, though. Your point hasn't been lost, and I think we can discuss that further. Now, let's move on to new business, which is the new board budget approval. I could ask Superintendent Wazinski, please.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So prepared for trustees today is the 2020-21 budget approval. So this has been probably one of the most challenging budgets in recent memory, but thanks for all the good work from senior team, from our managers, from a lot of our other workers and accountants that have helped put together this budget, especially some of the many trustee preparation meetings that we've had since February 2020. So the preparation of the 2021 budget faced a number of unprecedented challenges and delays as the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in the postponement of the ministry's announcement of the GSN. Now, typically, we would receive the GSN in March. However, this year it was delayed until June, which resulted in the rescheduled submission date to the ministry. The GSN announcement assured school boards that disruption to funding formula will be minimal and that the investments will be made to support school boards in not only responding to the COVID outbreak, but to address the unique learning needs of students. So in front of trustees today, the total operating budget for the 2020-21 school year is $333,662,210, has increased $12 million from the budget prepared for trustees in 2019-2020. As you know, every budget is reliant on enrollment, and our projected enrollment for the school board for 2020-21 is expected to decrease by 85 students, or 0.03%. A small decrease from estimates of 2019-20. So we are starting to see that flattening of our enrollment. Now, if you look at the details, our elementary ADE is projected to increase 208 students, while our secondary enrollment is projected to decrease 293. Now, in our GSN announcement, there are a number of significant changes to the development of the budget. Most importantly was the response to the COVID-19 outbreak, and trustees received a number of pieces of information with respect to some of those new PPFs that were announced, including hiring to support additional staff, health and safety investments, mental health and well-being investments, investments in technology, and investments in enhanced cleaning across our system. There will be other funding that will be announced, and trustees will be able to be updated hopefully by revised estimates, and those will include funding and procurement support for masks, PPE, costs of enhanced cleaning to schools and buses, and also to support additional enhancements to cleaning protocols on buses. Funding will also be available to support the hiring of additional teachers, and potentially reduce class sizes. With respect to compensation, the ministry will provide a 1% salary benchmark increase for staff where negotiated collective agreements have been provisionally ratified for 2021. With respect to class sizes, there was no changes to elementary class sizes. However, the funded average class size was reduced from 28 to 23. Now, this will eliminate Grand Erie's reliance on the attrition protection funding for next school year. But if you recall, our ability to get from about 23.4 to 23.5 down to 23 did not require us to rely on that funding to be able to keep the staffing levels where they should be with respect to the Pupil Foundation grant. One of the highlights of the GSN was a targeted new investment. So similar to local priorities funding or the extension agreement funding, which was discontinued after the 18-19 school year, Ministry announced a new support for student funds. This will provide flexible funding for school boards to support the learning needs of students, which may include special education, mental health and well-being, language instruction, Indigenous education, and STEM programming. Our allocation for next school year is projected to be $2.9 million, and we are working in collaboration with our union leaders to develop spending plans that will align with those needs. Complementary to the GSN, we also do receive annual PPFs, and although last year, due to the timing of the GSN, there were none announced, we are pleased to announce that there will be 4 new PPFs totaling approximately $1 million that Grand Erie will be receiving. The After Schools and Development Programs, our Math Strategy, Parents Reaching Out grants, and the Well-Being and Mental Health bundle. There were other PPFs that were announced, yet they just haven't been announced to school boards. There are also a number of uncertainties regarding our budget. This essentially is tied to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it will be difficult to predict some instances of what 2020-21 will look like. In the current school year, the environment in which students learned and staff worked from shift dramatically to a virtually focused environment. This forced staff and students to adapt. As a result, operating budgets were developed cautiously so that expenditure plans had flexibility in the event that boards are required to shift between conventional or adaptive models next year. Senior administration has also allocated significant resources from this school year's budget to devote to health and safety enhancements and supplies that may be required for reopening in September 2020. We are pleased to announce an operating budget to trustees that is balanced without the use of reserves, that is compliant with all legislation regarding class size ratios, envelope spending restrictions on special education administration, and supports many of the initiatives or multi-year plan and the learning plan leveraging digital. Some of the highlights include investing in the classroom to support student achievement, as evidenced by an anticipated increase of 22 full-time elementary teachers, the addition of an experiential learning to provide effective experiential learning opportunities for students, an increase to the complement of designated early childhood educators by 8 FTE, the conversion of 2 educational assistants into 2 lead educational assistants to better serve our schools in special education. In addition, technology investments continue to play an important factor for staff and students to succeed. These investments for 2021 include an additional $432,000 to continue the board's long-term computer purchase plan to refresh technology for staff and students, $1 million in effort to complete the province's broadband modernization program, an additional $278,000 to support the growth for the long-term information technology reserve. The biggest change from last budget to this year was the investment into transportation. Now, you'll recall the existing contract is set to expire on August 31st, 2020, and Grand Erie will be entering into a new 10-year agreement with transportation providers who will deliver home-to-school services for students. The additional $1.9 million investment is the end result of an extremely organized and modern competitive procurement process. Grand Erie has benefited from its current contract, which included below market rates. As a result, the majority of the increase is due to a return to market level minimum wages and capital infrastructure costs. However, these investments do include some additional features that will improve the level of services delivered by STS BHN. These include GPS on every unit, camera systems on 15% of the bus fleet, and roof-mounted strobe lights on all buses. It should be noted that although expenditures increased almost $2 million, funding did not move at all. This is a fundamental problem with the transportation funding formula, and we're hoping when the ministry does come out with its review of transportation funding, that our situation and other boards are looked at with respect to costs moving in alignment with revenue. With respect to the capital budget, we have seen a similar announcement with respect to school condition improvement and school renewal amounts similar to 2019-20 and 18-19. One of the caveats is that there are no new capital priorities expected to commence, as the 3 submissions made to the ministry last September were not successful. You'll see in our listing, though, that we do have a number of capital priorities on there. One is the Elgin Avenue Public School, which was announced in 2017, yet has been paused and postponed by the government numerous times. And you'll see Central Public School, which is anticipated to be completed in 2020-21. Hagersville, which is currently underway, is anticipated to be completed by the end of August, early September. So we don't anticipate it affecting the capital priorities pieces as presented. In addition, we're looking to spend $19.5 million on school condition improvement amounts. This, anywhere from learning commons conversions to masonry, paving, roofing, window and door upgrades. These are major capital items that you'll see in a lot of our schools, where we devote a lot of the resources to our aging buildings. One of the new pieces we're going to be looking at in 2020-21 to better utilize our dollars is a classroom modernization program, is to really look at what a standard is for Grand Erie across our system and try to benchmark it so all students and all staff has access, and also look at some sort of branding with respect to Grand Erie, essentially modernizing some of the spaces, what is inside classrooms, but also inside schools. We will continue to invest in school renewal by supporting our community partnership and incentive program, our Pride of Place, and the $2.1 million earmark for that will also go towards other interior finishes, gym curtains, and accessibility upgrades. Finally, there's $2.6 million set aside for other capital assets, such as technology purchases, facilities equipment, furniture replacement, and vehicles. So the upcoming 2021 school year will undoubtedly be a challenging one. Although there remains a great deal of uncertainty on what the impact COVID will have on our sector, the budget is built with some flexibility to reduce, defer, or shift department budgets into spending that will support health and safety, PPE, cleaning, physical distancing, and technology. Senior administration has developed this budget with certain assumptions regarding reopening Grand Erie schools, and as with any plan, risks are inherent, but staff remain optimistic that these risks will not have a significant disruption to the carefully laid out plan being proposed to trustees. Some of the risks that are inherent in the budget do surround itself around staff absenteeism and the associated staff replacement costs, adequate supervision requirements or the investment in additional supervision requirements, cleaning and sanitation requirements, PPE, and mass procurement, physical barrier enhancement, heightened awareness of potentially volatile enrollment patterns, staff and student anxiety, and fluctuating utility pricing are all realistic risks that could have a significant impact on the budget. The cost of ensuring health and safety standards are met or exceeded during the school year could become difficult to control. Ministry involvement will be critical in ensuring the proposed budget being presented today stays on track throughout next year. However, given the assumptions, inherent risks, and alignment to the multi-year plan, senior administration is confident in recommending both the operating and capital budgets for approval, as they emphasize not only Grand Erie's goal for success for every student, they reflect a new reality, an environment where COVID pandemic affects every facet of education. That is the 2020-21 budget. And as you recall, this is tied to the information that was shared with trustees at the last board budget meeting, with the only change being that the additional 1.4 million for COVID has now been included in revenue and expenses. At this time, I will open up the floor to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Superintendent Wozicki. I just want to clarify, I did skip over, when I asked Trustee Culver about the discussion with local MPPs, I didn't pay attention clearly. So we will be doing that topic after we deal with the budget, just so we haven't forgotten about it. That was my error. Superintendent Wozicki, I think you put an admirable amount of work into this, as obviously so has Manager Cindy Smith, and I think it's really quite a package you put together. I'm going to see if we have questions. Trustee Culver first, please, then Trustee Sloat.
Yes, I want to thank Raf for such a detailed report. I don't think in all my time sitting in this chair that I've had such a detailed, clear understanding of our budget. So this should be very readable for our public, and it's also very readable for us. So I thank you for that. Just one question on page 2. You talk about halfway down, you're talking about other funding that hasn't been announced yet. And the last bullet talks about funding is also available where needed to support the hiring of additional teachers. Is that the 30 million that was application based?
Yes.
So I know ministry had announcement Thursday. It's only been a couple of days. In that memo, did they not speak how they've given allotted that money out now rather than an application base?
Correct. So that just shows you how quickly things can change from a printed report to the reality. So yes, the government has shifted the way that they're awarding those dollars. So the 30 million has now been allocated on a per board basis. And to update you, Grand Erie has not received any dollars with respect to that funding. And the reason why is that we're waiting on a memo with respect to reserves. And the detail to that memo will be specific to Grand Erie. And the reason that's important is our reserve is not yet at 2%. So we are considered one of the other boards that will receive a memo at a later point in time describing how we are going to be able to either use additional funding, or we will be eligible for additional funding with respect to hiring additional classroom teachers.
Thank you for answering my second question before I ask it. So thank you very much, Raf, for your information.
Thanks, Trustee Culver. Okay, Trustee Sloat, please.
I think I'm sort of on the same thing about reserve funds, because, we are, compared to some boards, we got nothing. Some have huge dollar amounts. I realize it's all spoken for in other ways. So just, if the board has to use reserves, that will come back to the board because it was not included in this budget. It will come to the board as a motion to approve that to spend for various things.
I think the director is going to jump in there, Trustee Sloat. Go ahead.
Yes, we will do that. And in fact, we have been looking at that today, and we will be prepared to come forward to the board for a request if that is the case. We're going to wait for that memo and the additional details, and then we will proceed with that.
But if I remember correctly from what's in our reserves, I mean, it comes in the fall report. I realize that, Ralph, I didn't have a chance to look at it. But are we putting ourselves in jeopardy in other places? I mean, a lot of that money is workers' comp and other sort of things. There's very little reserve that we can actually, that isn't spoken for, other than, some money from sale of lands, which isn't a lot. And we need that for if we ever get money for a new school. So I'm just wondering, is it not a good thing to, we worked very hard to get the reserves to where they are. So if you want to comment on that, please.
Yes, we have. So our reserves are currently sitting at just over $2.9 million, which is about 1% of our operating allocation. That's essentially why we're not on that 2% list. So yes, there was some risk would be actualized if we decided to spend against that 2.9. It goes against our IT reserve plan. It goes against some of our local priority funding that has been earmarked by the ministry. Some goes to WSIB and some is just set away for future priorities. Again, we really need that memo to understand how we're going to be topped up from the 1% to the 2%, because that could potentially mean an additional $3 million. So it's a very delicate and sensitive situation, and we will definitely update trustees as we receive more information on it and digest the items.
Thanks, Superintendent. Trustee Sloat, any further questions? No? Are there any other questions from trustees? Okay, we have two separate motions here. I'd like someone to move the first, which is to approve an operating budget of $333,000. Trustee Sloat, a seconder. Trustee Dixon. Is there anybody opposed to approving this? Seeing none, that carries. The second motion is that we have a capital budget of $30.908 million, and that's Trustee Worden. And who is a seconder? Trustee Dixon again. Thank you. Who is opposed to approving this? Not seeing any of that also carries. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Superintendent Zielinski. I will echo some of the comments made by Trustee Culver about how much work and how very readable this is. Speaking of Trustee Culver, would you now like to go over the item I omitted? Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Chair Henderson. So this was brought to our attention. We are in a very unique position here in Grande Prairie to build a relationship with our two local MPPs who both happen to be in the ruling government. I think we need to build a relationship for when we have an ask that they lobby in our favor. Because again, capital funding, we had 3 submissions and we're not approved for any. So I think I'd like to see us build a relationship with these two MPPs. So when we have an ask, they have an understanding of our needs, our willingness to work with them. So I'd like to set up some form of meetings with our two MPPs going forward on those bases.
And I totally agree with that suggestion. I think it's excellent. I think we need a little bit more push from both Trustee Bouma and Trustee Barrett. Neither one of them seems to have had too much of an influence, because clearly we could use some more capital. Trustee Sloat, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Trustee Culver.
MPP Barrett's office did work somewhat for us around the last capital funding, because 2 asks were definitely in his riding. But I think we need a really organized effort for them to really understand our challenges and our needs. So we need to build that relationship with them first before we go in asking for ask.
Yep, agreed. So I guess at this point, Trustee Culver, are you suggesting we put together, or did you and I, as the chair and vice chair, wish to approach and take the next steps for this?
Maybe our first approach should be to contact MPPs to see their willingness to meet and just what that would look like. And then throw around some dates and then put it out. If that's the agreement of the board, I'd reach out to the MPPs first to see how they're handling meetings.
All right. Any other thoughts? As I have no problem making that contact with both. Trustee Sloat, go ahead.
Just back to the original reason why we're here again. I noticed a lot of the media things have been saying that the local MPPs have done a great job, lobbying for their local community. And the last time we were turned down, I do remember, I think it was Superintendent Brzezinski saying that, like the one in West Brantford, just for an example, it was a great, it's a great idea. It ticks all the boxes because it's with the city of Brantford and that sort of thing. And it basically, they said, you are so close, next time we'll look after you. So I'm just wondering if Superintendent Brzezinski has received any feedback from the Capital Branch and anything, or has it just been sorry about your luck? So because I am concerned that we were told last time that we were basically a shoe, and I realize we're not the biggest. We have a couple pressing areas of need in the board, we do, and we've worked very hard not to have extra pupil places. Thanks.
Yeah, so we have a feedback meeting scheduled with the ministry this Wednesday morning, where our facilities manager will attend. But I do want to just straighten out one thing. I guess the feedback that we got from our September 2017 submission was that the timing wasn't right for Grand Erie. So I think they kind of focused on the enrollment. And I think the big thing that changed is that there wasn't a capital submission window in 2018. And the big factor is that although our window that we got closer to reality is not as urgent as other boards. So there are other boards in some of the areas such as Bradford and Milton, where their schools are looking at 20, 30 portables. I mean, we're not there yet. And I think that was maybe one of the biggest factors with respect to enrollment, but hopefully we get some good information from our capital analyst on Wednesday, and we'll be able to provide that feedback back to trustees when we are able to put a report together on it.
Thanks. Further questions or comments from trustees? Okay, if I don't see any dissent, I think what I can do is with Vice Chair Culver and myself, I would certainly reach out to the two MPPs and see if we could not set up some form of a meeting informally to discuss, just to say the needs of our board, and we're looking at going forward, not stressing the negative, but stressing how we want to look at trying to. We have some housing issues in our schools. We need some extra space. I think certainly in West Brant. I would say to an extent as well, Caledonia, and clearly, if we're going to try and look at Elgin, Simcoe, we do need some help and support. So, Trustee Culver, are you comfortable with that? If you and I discuss this further and approach the two MPPs?
I'm good with whatever you decide, or the board decides. Yeah.
All right. Okay. I don't think we need a motion for that, do we? I think that's just sort of a nodding of heads. We're comfortable with that. Okay. Now, I'm going to say at this point, before I turn over to Trustee Sloat's favorite part at the very end, just because the way things are changing so rapidly in this province, I would like you to keep next Monday evening as a possible opening in case we need yet another special board meeting. Okay, I think it's safe to say that things are happening fast and furiously, so there may be more things. So I'm just saying as a possibility, it would clearly be as this, it would be on Teams, as will obviously the meeting on the 31st. It will be as well. In September, we can't really tell until we've seen the report and if we voted on it and made a decision. But certainly, please keep next Monday open as a possibility. So, any further discussion or questions? I think we've hit the all-time record tonight. I went to a fourth list of names, and I was amazed. Trustee Culver, Trustee Sloat, would you like to make a motion? You would. She's now moved for adjournment. Can I get a seconder, please?
Second that.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Spears. Anybody opposed to adjourning at this time? Okay, folks, we are adjourned. Thank everybody. Thank you to all the SOs for sticking around as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night, all.
Have a good night.